Welcome to Counterpoints. I'm joined today, of course, by Ryan Grimm, who's looking lovely. Actually, no, Ryan's out for one more week, and Krystal is filling in. Thank you so much, Krystal.
Yeah, you guys are stuck with me all week, so apologies for that. But we have a lot of good stuff to talk about today. We got big developments with the debt ceiling. Emily has some inside scoop about what the Freedom Caucus is thinking, right? That's fair to say, right?
I think so. A little insight, I guess.
Yeah, so we'll get into that big day for whether that is going to pass or not. We also have some escalations in terms of U.S.-Chinese tensions, including sort of interaction between two fighter jets that we have some video of we can show you. Also, this is perfect for Emily, a deep dive into what is going on in the state of Wisconsin, especially Republicans sort of despairing there about whether they're going to be able to win back the state, especially with the politics of abortion. So we'll talk about that. Some new numbers about how millennials are doing in terms of their finances and the factors that, how student loan debt weighs into all of that. Ted Cruz getting in some hot water, I guess, with his own base over some comments he made about that horrific law that was just passed against LGBTQ people in Uganda. So we'll talk about that as well. But we did want to start with the very latest in terms of the debt ceiling, Emily.
That's right, because it continues to change on a minute-by-minute basis, as obviously the House is expected to vote today. Kevin McCarthy now reportedly wants to get to 150 Republican votes for this deal that was brokered by the Republican Speaker of the House out of 222 House Republicans. So that means he's expecting or hoping at best to lose some 70 members of his own conference. We're going to get into in a little bit why so many members of the Freedom Caucus and of Kevin McCarthy, not even just Freedom Caucus members, but people like Nancy Mace, are upset with this deal. But for now, let's start with Jake Sherman. You can put up A1 here. He's saying this is Thomas Massie. He's a libertarian member of the Freedom Caucus. He's saying, quote, he anticipates voting for this rule. That is, as Jake Sherman says, big for Republican leadership because Kevin McCarthy needs Thomas Massie, needs people like Thomas Massie to kind of fall in line on this vote in order to potentially get to that 150 number. Obviously, if you've been following this story, Republicans were feeling good about it. They passed their budget earlier this year. They felt really good about that budget. Obviously, it was a non-starter with the White House. The White House said, we're not negotiating at all. Ended up negotiating.
Right.
Democrats are unhappy about that. It's now on the floor of the House today, and the Biden administration actually isn't that upset about what is going to be passed. We can use A2 here. This is from Lauren Fox. Now, in the Senate, John Thune here has said, this is also a really big quote. He's confident there will be at least 9 Republican senators who support the debt ceiling bill, assuming it comes to the Senate. Oh, yeah, Thune told CNN when pressed on if there would be enough GOP votes to clear a 60-vote threshold in the chamber. All right, so not only does the math then check out in the House, the math checks out in the Senate, and President Biden is cool with the deal. Let's actually roll, or we'll take one look actually here at what Speaker McCarthy, you can put up the next element, A3. We have a lot of like rapid fire reactions that have been coming out over the course of the last day as there's been a little bit of a revolt. This is Kevin McCarthy kind of taking a W here, saying President Biden claimed he'd never negotiate. Leader Schumer insisted there'd be a, quote, clean debt increase. They were wrong. Republicans fought to spend less, block Biden's new tax proposals, claw back unspent COVID money, and fully fund our veterans and defense priorities. Okay, so there you have Kevin McCarthy saying expectations were low and Republicans met them, essentially is what he's saying. And one thing I've heard from some folks is that it's one thing to say, listen, we have little leverage, we don't want to play default chicken, so this is the best we could do, working with the president. On the other hand, trying to sell this deal as a big win is a totally different choice. And that, I think, is definitely what's rankling some folks.
So a couple things. First, on the mechanics. They passed the first hurdle through that Rules Committee. That was the Thomas Massie situation. He was like the swing vote there, and it passed out of the Rules Committee 7-6. That was the first hurdle. Now they're looking to have an actual vote on the House floor. And I don't think anyone doubts that there's a majority of House members, both Republicans and Democrats, if you put them together, who would vote for this debt ceiling deal increase situation. The challenge for McCarthy is that he has to have a majority of his caucus. And as you're pointing out, Emily, he's actually setting the bar a little bit higher than that. He doesn't want to just barely have a majority of his caucus. He wants to have the bulk of his caucus, something like 2/3 of the caucus, behind this deal for him to feel comfortable. Why? Because as we're about to talk about, If he doesn't, his speakership could be in jeopardy. You already have rumblings and more than rumblings from some members of the House Freedom Caucus about being very unhappy and upset with this deal. So that's the mechanics of it. Those are the big hurdles. Still remains to be seen how many Republicans go along with this, given the fact that you have not just the House Freedom Caucus, other members, as you point out, like Nancy Mace, and also a lot of conservative media and people like Ron DeSantis, Mike Pence, a number of like mainstream Republican figures and a lot of conservative media that have come out against this deal. So that's sort of the lay of the land. Do I think it's going to pass? Do I think he's going to get the numbers? If I had to bet, I'd say yes.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's at all like 100% certain. So that's kind of where things stand. What I'm interested to get from you is, you know, I think it was a mistake the way that Biden and the Democrats played this from the beginning. I think it was a mistake to say we won't negotiate and then to cave. I think it was a mistake to take off the table things like the 14th Amendment and other workarounds because that completely stripped the White House of their leverage. Like it became very clear Biden was determined to get a deal. And that's why Democrats and people like me expected there to be a lot more extracted out of his side of the bargain than ultimately was. I still think this deal is bad. I have all kinds of issues with it, but it's a lot less bad from my perspective than what I expected. So what do you think happened here? Like, did McCarthy, seriously, like, is McCarthy close to Wall Street and they were freaked out about what going over the cliff might mean? Did he just, you know, was he like charmed by Biden and Biden's really that great of a negotiator or something? Like, what is the explanation for why the deal ended up being a lot less than what I expected and what a lot of Republicans expected they might be able to extract out of this situation?
Yeah, I think it's not wanting to play default chicken at the end of the day. Kevin McCarthy, I think, understands that the media is going to take Biden's side. It's not going to take his side if an actual default looms. And this is all happening in the context of the X date, right, which Janet Yellen first pegged to June 1, which would be, what is that, Thursday? So coming right up.
Tomorrow.
So tomorrow, that's why the vote is happening today, because there's this, she then sort of said it might be more like June 5th. It's sort of a subjective figure, but that's not wanting to play default chicken, learning or looking back on the Tea Party years and all of the times where that did not go well for Republicans, either with voters or with the media, probably because of the media in some sense. I think is what made everything become rushed, urgent, and put the ball in Biden and the Democrats' court. And we see clearly that Biden and the Democrats know the ball is in their court. We have some sound we're going to play in a bit. But it's been very interesting to see Republicans spreading all of these messages from kind of establishment Dems saying how happy they are with the deal.
Yeah, it's interesting. You see two very different communication strategies. Biden even came out and said, we played this with Sagar yesterday, he even came out and said, like, do you really think it would help get this deal through if I was out there, like, singing its praises and how great it was and, like, crowing about what a great deal Democrats were able to achieve? So the White House has made a strategic decision to keep things kind of quiet and not rub Republicans' noses in the fact that they didn't get everything that they wanted. Again, I think the deal is bad and I have issues with it, but it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. Republicans, on the other hand, Kevin McCarthy, we showed his comments earlier, he's really out there trying to sell like, oh, we really showed the Democrats and they didn't get anything, and here's all the great cuts that we were able to achieve. So even that is kind of a tell of which side really feels like they got the better end of these negotiations.
That's a good point.
At the end.
Well, yeah, let's put up A4 because to Krystal's point, Newt Gingrich is out there sort of trumpeting the, what does Nancy Pelosi call herself, a master legislator? The master legislating of Kevin McCarthy. He said the debt limit deal is a dramatic victory for Speaker McCarthy and House Republicans before they passed their history-changing bill. No one would have believed it possible to cut spending, reestablish work requirements, reform permitting for energy and infrastructure, and more. There's some truth to that, which I think some people in this moment, there's a little bit of negotiation theater, which is inevitable in any type of deal like this that's happening on Capitol Hill, or even if you're trying to buy a used car or if you're playing poker, right? You have to have your poker your poker face. There's some measure of theater that's happening. And so there is some part of the Freedom Caucus guys that they're saying, like, listen, go back to the negotiating table. The president of the Heritage Foundation, Kevin Roberts, said, go back to the negotiating table. This is unacceptable, to see if they can get Kevin McCarthy back to the negotiating table. But he does not have much leverage. He has never had much leverage. And so the likelihood of something like this being the deal was always pretty high. Now, could it have been better? I think absolutely yes. I don't think anybody is wrong to be upset about this deal. There is, though, truth to the fact that when you don't want to play default chicken, if you don't want to be blamed for that because you know the media is going to say it was those dang Republicans, then, hey, you don't have you have no leverage at all, basically, when you don't control 2/3 of the government.
Yeah, so McCarthy, I guess, in the end, wasn't able to posture as being as crazy as like the Freedom Caucus types. Truly, I mean, that is one frequent tactic in negotiations that's very effective. I mean, Trump used this sometimes where you had to appear like you're crazy enough to actually take the thing over the cliff. And, you know, I guess he decided that for political reasons or for Wall Street reasons or whatever reasons, he wasn't really willing to be as wild-eyed and as crazy as, you know, maybe the Lauren Boeberts and the Marjorie Taylor Greenes and the Matt Gaetz of the world would want him to be.
Yeah.
It is interesting. As I said before, the Biden White House has tried to sort of be a little quiet, just let this thing all roll out. And there are a lot of Democrats, too, who have been expressing like their dissatisfaction with the deal, especially the cuts to the IRS, some of the work requirement stuff. Although it just came out that on the SNAP, that's the food stamp program, work requirements edition, once you net out all the changes that were made to SNAP, you're actually going to have an increase of 78,000 additional recipients on SNAP. So I don't think Democrats can be too mad about the changes that were made there. And the reason is because while they're increasing work requirements on single men between 50 and 54, they are eliminating work requirements for veterans and homeless people. So that's why you have this net increase. In any case, you did have a Biden economic advisor who went on CNN to sell this deal a little bit. Let's listen to how he's speaking to it.
And we're confident that it will get to the president's desk. I want to emphasize that it accomplishes three main things. Number one, it takes the possibility of a default off the table, which means we avoid an almost certain recession because of a first ever debt default. Number two, it protects all of the key pieces of legislation that the president signed into law in the last 2 years. New investments in clean energy, new investments in semiconductor manufacturing, new infrastructure investments that are being seen across the country. And third of all, it protects Social Security, it protects Medicare, it protects Medicaid, all these important programs that Americans rely on. What we are trying to do is preserve those investments, preserve the progress that we have made. And we've done that by essentially locking in the wins that we've gotten over the last 2 years.
So a big piece of the negotiations, Republicans in their bill that they passed originally from the House had really taken an axe at the Inflation Reduction Act, which has a lot of tax credits to move towards, you know, clean energy transition. None of that was touched. And I do think that was an important win for the White House, given the fact that, you know, I think their whole approach, the White House from the beginning, was really stupid and ill-advised, et cetera.
Agree.
But given that they put themselves in a really bad position, the fact they were able to protect all of the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the signature achievement of President Biden and of some of the more progressive folks in Congress, I do think that was an important part.
Absolutely. And that's one of the big things that Freedom Caucus members are looking at and saying, we passed this budget. This was important to us. And here we are. We're at a place where none of that was touched. The IRS, what this bill does with the IRS, I mean, it rescinds $1.4 billion in IRS funding. But that's really, that's not what people wanted, because that was also a huge cornerstone of Biden's agenda. When you're adding 87,000 new employees at the IRS, some of whom will be agents, not all 87,000 will be agents, but that was a huge, huge Republican talking point, and most of it didn't happen, and most of it, I don't think they're seeing Kevin McCarthy fight for. And I think that's probably what's upsetting them, because not only are they not seeing him fight for it, they're also not seeing him say, listen, this is the best we can do, and sort of be kind of blatant and obvious about the problems. He's really trying to act like this is a great deal. To you know, Newt Gingrich, who's an ally of Kevin McCarthy, to the point that he tweeted that out, I think that tells you kind of what the problem is, acting like this is a huge win, as opposed to saying, this is the best we can do.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Soccer and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.